We want one event to happen in between two other events. We can also say not between. We can't, in general, say not because it's too open-ended, right? But we can say not between because that's bounded on both sides. So if the user doesn't click the button after going to one page before they go to Google, then we're going to have this. So these are the kind of complex event expressions which are available in KRL now. I expect that there will be other complex event expressions which will be available as we gain more experience. I've thought of a few others that we need even just over the last couple of weeks. So we'll be adding those as we go along. And if you have other ideas for event expressions you'd like to see, I'd love to hear about them. Now these can be nested. Right? So the event expression language is general so that any of these expressions can replace any other. So here you see that this is going to select when the click is not between those two things before another click. We can create arbitrarily complex scenarios using this event expression language and then have rules that respond to those complex scenarios. Now, we talked about we talked about rules having events, conditions, actions, and effects. And I don't want to go through a lot of detail because I'm going to show you an example in just a second and show you some examples that I think will be better than talking about them in general. But I did want to mention a couple of specific things. The first thing is that we make great use of what I think of as little languages. There are a number of little languages embedded inside KRL. So the first one, if you've done any KRL programming, is regular expressions. Coming from the Perl world, I'm a big regular expression fan, and so regular expressions are just built in. A Perl fan right there. And there's lots of different places where regular expressions can be used. We also use something called JSON path, which is like XPath, but for JSON. So if you're familiar with XPath, JSON path works similarly. I'll show you an example of JSON path in just a minute. We do read XML data sources. At present, we convert them to JSON. That's probably not the end game because you lose some things in that conversion. We'll probably be leaving things as XML in the future and also adding XPath to this as a little language that you can use. And then finally, we also use jQuery HTML selectors inside the language in order to select HTML components. On the data side, we have things like geolocation and weather, general JSON XML reading from the web, Twitter. We've done a pilot with Axiom where we have Axiom data available on a permissioned basis through an OAuth front end. Like I said, that's a pilot. We also have GData right now, just iCal, but that's kind of the first make everything work piece of getting other GData pieces or GData sources in the language. So if you have GData that is really important to you and it's not iCal, let us know. We can pick that as the next one to work on. So we're after your feedback in that case. We have Amazon, their product API. So you can get all of the Amazon product data inside KRL and use it. We anticipate that we'll also enhance that to include other Amazon APIs as appropriate. And then finally, just this last week or so, as Steve mentioned, Mark put OData in. The initial one that we integrated was the Netflix API. But again, that's just one of a lot of different OData sources that are out there. If you have ones that are your favorites that you really need for doing something, let us know. Now, in general, our goal is not to onesie-twosie integrate things deeply into the language. Our goal in general is to create a generalized interface that you can go grab any piece of OData and any piece of GData. We're not quite there yet, but that's where we're headed, right? Another abstraction, right? So we want you to be able to specify it. You can do that right now. If you have a data source that's out online and uses XML or JSON, you can just grab it. Oh, it is generalized. Very good. I didn't know that. So thanks. Oh, that's right, because you showed me yesterday, you specify the root as part of the language. Yeah, so thanks. So it's even more general than I thought. All right. So this is an example rule, and I apologize, it's probably a little small to read. But this is a simplified version of the... oh, my wife's calling. We'll have to wait. This is a simplified version This is a simplified version of the library lookup rule that I showed you working in the demo just a minute ago. So you'll notice that this is a rule set called library. The first thing that we do is we declare a data source in the global block. So we declare a data source named library search, and we give it a URL, and we say that it's cacheable. And in general, when you say cacheable, that means for 24 hours. If you only wanted it cached for 3 hours, you could say cacheable for 3 hours, and then our system will cache it for 3 hours. So we try to take all of that hard work of, standing up a system and caching data and all of that. We try to make that all seem automatic inside the language. There's only one rule here, and that rule is called book notification. The first thing in there is the select statement. In this case, it's pretty simple. It's just selecting when there's a page view on Amazon.com, and it uses this regular expression /D to grab the ISBN, and notice that it's captured. That's what the parentheses mean. And you put parentheses around something in a regular expression. That means capture that value, and that's what's used to set the variable ISBN there at the end. And then the next thing we do is we use the data source that we declared earlier, the library search data source, to query that URL with the ISBN that we just grabbed from Amazon. That comes back as a JSON data source called book data. Now we want a couple of things out of that. We want the URL and the title. And so we use this pick operator, and the pick operator is how we pick things out of a complex data source. In this case, it's JSON, and so we're going to use JSON path. That $docs means find the node named docs somewhere deep inside that JSON structure, and then take the first one, right, it's the array value 0, and grab the URL out of that. We're just grabbing the first book and getting its value for URL. And then we're doing the same thing for the title in the next line. The next thing we do is we create a little template called MSG, and we use this bee sting notation, the £, bracket, with the variable name, to actually stick the value of the URL and the title inside this piece of HTML that we're creating. Now, the next thing we do is the condition on the action. So conditionally, we're only going to fire this rule if we actually find a book, right? We don't want to put up a notification and have it look ugly if there's no book there. And so this says if the number found is greater than 0, and again, notice that we're picking it out of the data structure, then put up this notification box. And that notify message there is what takes the message we created up there. The notify action, is what creates the message we took up there and actually puts that black box up on the site. Right? So that notify action is what does that. And then finally, we have an effect. In this case, it's a callback. And we're declaring this callback to be something we want to have happen when, or we want to consider it a success. And it happens whenever someone clicks on an element with the class MLN link. And you'll notice that we named, there's a mistake. That says class and that's an ID. So that wouldn't actually work. But you'll notice we named the link up there as an ID MLN link. So we should have said ID equals MLN link down there in the callback. So that's an example of a rule that does the demo that I just showed you. All right, it's a little simplified from the demo I showed you, but not much. Pretty much if you put this code in, it would run and put up a notification of whether or not the book was found at the Minuteman Library Network. So now it's time to do a couple of demos. So what I want to do is, first of all, write a very simple KRL rule for those of you who have never seen a KRL rule written before. And then we'll do something a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to go to the new app builder. If you go to appbuilder.kynetx.com, you're going to get the old one. When are we moving this over, Wade? Maybe it's already moved over. Here we go. Okay. So this is the new app builder interface. You'll notice that it's quite different. There's a list here. There are things like duplicate the rule, some other things that people have cried out for. We're going to create a new app. And we're going to name it Impact Demo. I'm going to say create. I think we have this running on a Casio watch right now. It'll be a lot faster.